Hi, my name is Tyler Purcell, and welcome to my brand new channel all about shooting on motion picture film called Celluloid Repository. On this channel, we're going to be talking about cameras and projection. We're going to be talking about film stocks and processing, and most importantly, scanning and new technology. The cool thing that I want to discuss today, before we launch our channel officially on April 30th, is I wanted to talk about my history and where I come from. Because that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand about YouTube commentators, is they just start mumbling and it's like, well, does this guy know what he's doing? And I wanted to kind of fill in some of those holes in an early episode. So here we go. I got my first still camera when I was 5 years old. And it was a big deal to me because it was the first piece of any celluloid I had to work with. And of course, I was in love with it. And it was just an Instamatic. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was really cool to be able to shoot stills on 35 millimeter and get them processed and get my prints back and see my negative. It was really cool. And I was so in love with the format from a young age because when I was about the same age, about 5 or so, my parents rented a Super 8 projector from our local library and some film prints for me to project for my friends. And just that experience of running the projector and watching these prints just blew my mind away. I had to get involved in this whole world. Of course, I was loving cinema since I was a kid. There was a power to it, but most everybody kind of likes cinema in some way or another if you're in the film industry, so it makes sense. My first Super 8 camera and first movie camera was this Yashica here. And I was really into shooting on Kodachrome. Kodachrome was my favorite stock. It's a slow lens camera, so I needed a relatively bright light to shoot with it. But this camera allowed me to shoot some stop motion photography, and it lasted from about age 7 to about age 10, where I actually ended up getting this kit right here at another yard sale. This was brand new at the time. It was a Japanese couple who had just moved to the United States, and they were selling off their stuff they got in Japan. And it was a complete Japanese set, which is quite amazing because it's a 100 volt projector that works with a switch to 120 volt. So it worked fine in America. And it was a big deal. All of a sudden I could project those movies like I could when I was a kid, and I was so excited about this. And so I loved this kit, and we shot tons of Super 8 sound. My favorite stock was the Ektachrome 160 because it allowed me to shoot in a little bit more available light. I had this amazing film I did at one of my favorite railroads when I was a kid, Evil Railroad, at night with no lights, and it still is there. There's still an image, and for that to happen was impossible with this camera. And so this thing has a f-stop of 1.3, so it's relatively fast compared to this camera. And it was just so much fun. I shot tons of movies, including a cross-country trip. And that was kind of my mainstay for a while. And then at the same time, I was shooting a ton of stills with this camera, which is my Nikkormat. It came out in the 60s, and it's a very bulletproof body. It's all made out of brass. And so as a consequence, you know, my dad thought it would be the best camera for me because if it got dropped or anything, it probably wouldn't get damaged. And he was right. I probably dropped it 3 or 4 times and it never got damaged. I only had this 50 millimeter lens, and so that's what I had to shoot with. And when I was going to school, during the summers, my parents had me go to creative arts school. And that creative arts school, it wasn't much more of a camp. It was more of a school because it was educational based. We made our own emulsion, we processed our own film. It was a big deal, and having my own camera was huge. We also made Super 8 movies, and we also did a little bit of 16 millimeter work, and that's why I ended up with this camera when I was 12 years old, because I wanted to join in with that whole group and do some 16 work with my own camera. So by the time I was 12, I had a Super 8 camera that was silent, I had a Super 8 sound kit, I had my Nikkormat, and I had my 16 millimeter camera, plus a ton of film prints of movies. And it was the beginning of my life. So over the years, of course, I was processing at middle school and high school and college. And even in high school, we did our own emulsion and stuff. And so I was always in the lab processing my own stuff, making my own prints, blowing up prints. And I have tons of prints around the house from shooting with this camera from my youth and doing a lot of experimentation, which is what it was all about, really. But most of it was black and white. And then, of course, I got into broadcasting because why not? it was the easiest way for me to translate into the film industry, right? Because you can't really just get into the film industry. You have to first kind of get into some other industry to kind of build those skills. So when I was 13 years old, my dad and I started volunteering for our local community access station. And in doing so, I spent a good solid 7 years with them, basically learning how to produce content. They taught me what I needed to know, and I was able to take those cameras and make my own productions and also do productions for them. I also did live directing when I was 15 years old. I was the youngest director of live news programming on the East Coast, which is an incredible feat in of itself. And so we were doing live shows all over the town. And yes, it was small potatoes, but it gave me the ability to understand how to make something perfect, right? Because when you're live, you can't really make any mistakes. And of course, piecing shows together from nothing, taking a bunch of B-roll and then making a story out of what you have. That was my critical thing, and I was able to take those skills eventually and move those into my experience in Hollywood. Before I actually went to college, I actually did a summer program at Emerson, and it was there that I needed to get a splicer. So this is my original splicer from my college days, and this is a roll of film that is an audio track from one of the short films I made during college, and we're actually going to talk about those films in other videos, so you'll be able to see kind of where I come from and what kind of films I made when I was younger. I spent 5 years going to college because I wasn't able to get into Emerson right away, and that was where I wanted to graduate from to get my BA. So I did 3 years at a community school, did a lot of photography there, a lot of processing. That was kind of my degree, and my program was working with photography because they didn't really have a video degree. And then I went to Emerson, got my film degree, and then I moved out to California where I started working in the film industry. Here in California, it was a little bit trickier than I expected to get in the film industry. It took me many years, but eventually I became a full-time freelance filmmaker, and most importantly, edited a bunch of feature films and have worked on several feature films myself, and shorts and mini documentaries and all sorts of stuff. I couldn't afford film cameras for a long time, so I was kind of one of those guys who shot on DV and HDV, and then when Blackmagic released the original pocket camera, I bought those. And so I was always kind of shooting and always kind of making product. I never stopped. But then when the film camera business kind of started to fizzle away and video kind of took off, I was able to acquire a lot more film cameras. And in doing so, I started my own film school called Celluloid Dreaming. And in that film school, I was able to teach for both high school and college level courses for a couple of years while I was not working full time. And now that I'm back working full time in the entertainment industry, it's been a blast. And now I can take a little bit of this time we have off for COVID and start shooting a YouTube series. Because let's face it, there's a lot of content missing from YouTube. There's a lot of great YouTubers out there who make a lot of great content, but I want to kind of elevate the content that's on YouTube a tiny bit. If I can raise it up by 10 to 15%, then I've done my job, and that's the goal of this channel. And so I really hope that you guys like and subscribe and share what we have going on here, because you've got someone here who's shot on all the formats, who has spent their entire life dedicated to the film industry, and has a lot of experience. I might not be perfect. I will definitely make mistakes in what I say, and so I'm going to kind of do a lot of broad strokes instead of getting into minute details, unless of course I'm working on a camera and maybe working on a projector or doing more detailed fine work. But I kind of want to bring up what's on YouTube a tiny bit, and I hope this channel can do that. So the official launch of this series is going to be April 30th, 2021. And we're going to try to run the series for around 50 weeks or so. So it's going to be a lot of content. And then at the end, we're probably going to take this whole set down and put my garage back to being a garage again. Then we're going to do a whole new series similar to this. That's going to be a different location. And it'll be more Q&A. It'll be more people asking me questions and me kind of answering them and showing them the equipment. But for the time being, I hope that you'll enjoy what we're going to deliver, because some of the subject matters we're going to go over is just stuff that's never covered. And some of it is stuff that is covered. And we hope to have a lot of demos of cameras and projectors and film stocks that will allow you to maybe understand a little bit more about how to shoot on film so that you can make your projects on film. I don't want to be one of those guys who just tells you how expensive film is. I want to be one of those guys who says, you can do it. It's not a problem. And where the focus is probably going to be primarily on 16, we are talking about many of the formats: Super 8, 9.5 millimeter, 35 millimeter, even large format. We're going to cover the whole gamut of working on motion picture film, especially the history of the reason why we have the formats we have today. So thanks for watching this little introduction video. I'll be back April 30th, and I will see you then.